We're and we're going to record and we're going to take it away, Sal.
Okay, thank you. We have talked about how a propagandist looks to identify thoughts that are existing in people's brains and not based on an individual, based on a population of people, and so that they can identify the narrative, the worldview, the bias of the individual, and so that they can then take the message that they want to communicate and frame it within that context, even to a point where they are persuading people to act in a way that is against their own self-interest. And I want to highlight, we talked through different psychological aspects and how that plays into the hands of the propagandists. Mind you, we're not teaching a class about psychology, but it is a lot about psychology because at the heart of the propagandist is a deep understanding of psychology. That is the root of that manipulation. And we also talked about how fear is exploited and its natural offspring of hate. And I wanted, as we start out, I know last week we talked about fear and hate, but I also want to capture another clip just to highlight again how this stuff plays out and what it all means.
March toward those neighborhoods, the fights began to erupt. Young people began to throw bricks and bottles. The bottom line was racial fear.
I've been hit so many times, I'm immune to it.
People.
We are seeing many scenes like that today because the tool, the technique has not changed. Fear still works, and it plays a very important role. And so part of the idea of reframing what it is you want to accomplish and having people act against their own interest. I want to show you a news report that is about COVID. Now, mind you, we have a pandemic and there are things that the society needs to do to try to confront the pandemic, to limit its spread, to get it under control so that people don't suffer and die. Yet, the propagandist is able to manipulate a sizable part of the population to fight against that. It is as if starving people are fighting against people who now want to feed them. And it is the tool of fear, and it is the techniques of propaganda that make that work.
And the rise in COVID cases has been happening, we know, in every state, but in several states and a couple of regions in particular, the surge has been especially painful. That includes Missouri, where there's been much discussion and debate about how to respond. Amna Nawaz looks at that part of the story.
The confusion and frustration over masking mandates that have frequently played out around the country erupted in St. Louis County on Tuesday night. Tensions boiled over during a county council meeting that focused on whether to roll back new mask mandates. Just the day.
I just want to highlight, when the public health official is speaking, notice the comment about how racial slurs are used against him.
Before, a mask mandate was issued requiring them for everyone over the age of 5. Now, the public health official called to testify during that meeting faced racial slurs, verbal attacks, and he said even physical intimidation as he was getting ready to leave. Dr. Faisal Khan is the acting director of the St. Louis County Health Department who testified, and he joins me now. Dr. Khan, welcome to the NewsHour, and thank you for making the time. Give me a sense of what it was like in that room that night when you walked into the council meeting to talk about why you think a new mask mandate is recommended. What was it like in the room?
Thank you, Amna. As a public official, it is my responsibility to respond and show up and answer questions posed by the legislative branch and elected officials whenever summoned. And so I went to the meeting armed with the facts and the information pertaining to the rationale and the urgency behind the public health order issued recently. And so when I walked into the room, I noticed a growing crowd with a palpable sense of unease and anger that was seemingly boiling over.
And tell me a little bit about how that message went over. As you talked about the need for a mandate, what was the case you were making? What have you seen on the ground there that tells you a mask mandate's necessary now?
So all indications are that the community transmission of the Delta variant is at an all-time high in Missouri. We are now showing up as a bright red hotspot in the heat map of the region, along with the states of Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. The crisis that erupted related to the Delta variant in Southwest Missouri has made its way to the St. Louis region. And so we were trying to be proactive and act in as efficient and as rapid a manner in imposing a mask mandate to try and stem off the same sort of situation that our colleagues in Southwest Missouri would have experienced. I fear now that with increasing hospitalizations and increasing pediatric hospitalizations, we will see some of the worst case scenarios play out over late summer and early fall.
You have said that you were berated during your testimony. You were pushed as you were leaving. You faced absolutely unacceptable racial slurs directed at you as well. But I watched some of the hearing. There's clearly a growing sense of frustration among people who don't think that they're getting straight guidance or feel they're getting shifting guidance from health officials such as yourself. Have you ever seen this level of frustration among people in receiving that kind of public health information?
No, not in my experience. However, I will say that it is perfectly understandable that people are angry, people are frustrated, and they're very worried about what might come next. They're worried sick about childcare issues and jobs and being able to return to some semblance of normality. And their frustration in some part stems from the changing and evolving public health guidance, from November last year to May this year to July, now with this public health order. And our answer to that is, look, we are not the enemy. The virus is the enemy. And so faced with this vicious enemy on this battlefield, if I may state it that way, it is changing tactics. It is deploying new weapons in the form of variants. And our responsibility is to be nimble enough to adapt our strategy and tactics to counter it. And
I'm going to stop it there. The point that's made is we are not the enemy. The virus is the enemy. But understand, these folks aren't just acting out because they're frustrated about the virus. They have been agitated to believe, number one, that most of the people who got sick, if you remember the reports from the early days, were people of color, the minority class, that government was doing things to try to help them. And what you had is the apparatus of propaganda was saying, you see, the government is doing things for those people, again, at the expense of us. And so then you get the introduction of racial anger that gets incorporated into these protests and demonstrations. Again, that's the tool of the propagandist, and that's what they seek to do, and they do it very well. Now, what's important to understand is that we decided to add an element onto this class related to COVID because there will be implications for the healthcare workers in experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. They're going to experience that from the care that they had to provide with people and the horrific scenes around that. Then they are going to have to deal with the stress disorder from people attacking them. They've had people go into emergency rooms and attack the healthcare workers. So this is so they really are getting it from two aspects, and it will be a problem that we will be dealing with in the future. With that, Dr. Bordan, you can pick up on PTSD.
Okay. Stress, we all have stress. It's an uncomfortable emotional response to something. Some of us kind of have chronic stress depending upon what we do on a daily basis. And then there's traumatic stress from a trauma. And the mental health care workers and some of the average citizens from families and friends are getting a lot of destructive feedback from people who feel that taking a vaccine is poison or it's against one's liberties, all kinds of things. And the mental health worker is really attacked quite strongly and quite viciously. At the beginning, we had very conflicting protocols as to how to handle the pandemic. That was a stressor for them. They had to work long hours, many days in a row. That was a stressor for them. They had people that weaponized the virus and weaponized the vaccine. That was a stressor. So there was all kinds of stressors. The media was a stressor for the mental health worker, but the media was a stressor for all of us. There was confusion, there was fear, and fear, we know, breeds anger, and Sal talks about how fear equals anger equals just a nice petri dish for the propagandist to work his or her evil magic. So stress, what can we do about it? First of all, we can lessen stress by educating ourselves as much as possible to the situation. And I think many of us did that, but a lot of us maybe overthought it too. And that'll be something for next week when Sal isn't here. By the way, I wanted to say that next week's class will begin with trash talk of Sal. And please prepare for that and bring notes as to any antidote that you'd like to discuss. But educating ourselves, knowing the topic, understanding our options, and knowing that we are lucky to live in the United States of America where we do have choices. Unfortunately, at the beginning of the pandemic and still at the pandemic, there are rules that must be followed if you want to partake of something very specific. They've just done away with the mask mandates for planes, buses, trains. Colombia, the country Colombia, used to have a mandate, I think they still do, that you have to wear a mask when you're by yourself in the car. So COVID has really bred a very unique kind of PTSD for us all. Now, many people in life, I think it's anywhere from 60 to 85% of the population will experience some kind of trauma that leaves us emotionally scarred. But the vast, vast majority of those people can get over that within about 30 days believe it or not. But there are some traumas, whether they are traumatic or chronic, that we don't get over so quickly and can lead to PTSD. And we know some of the symptoms. I think we have something to put up, do we, about PTSD symptoms?
No, we didn't.
We didn't?
No.
Okay. I gave it to you, Sal.
I don't think we do.
Yes, that's
No,
okay.
I have
I have them. I have
Okay.
them. There's a PTSD to be distinguished from panic attacks, and we'll talk about panic attacks in just a minute. But some of us think of PTSD as you have to be a combat veteran and you had to have directly experienced life-threatening events in order to have PTSD. But many of us can have PTSD from some of the stressors that we've experienced in life. And sometimes those feelings, those symptoms need a little bit of assistance in order to be, moved forward from. Sometimes drugs, sometimes antidepressants that can help anxiety. We'll talk about that when we talk about next week and defense mechanisms, how we can go about remedying something like that. But so don't think in terms of PTSD as you had to go through the Vietnam War or Operation Desert Storm or World War II in order to have PTSD. We have rescue workers that have PTSD. We have ordinary citizens who have PTSD. Some people have it because they have grieved the death of a loved one, and there were very difficult circumstances surrounding that death, especially during COVID time. And there are, sometimes you have a flashback to the experience of not being able to take care of your loved one because either she or he had COVID, or perhaps the reverse, you had COVID and you weren't able to be of assistance to someone whom you felt very, very close to. And there can be a sense of self-blame. There can be a sense of that you betrayed somebody. We're always looking for fault. It's one of our irrational quests that we have as just human beings. Many years ago, someone ate a bite of an apple and we're far from perfect. So there's a lot of conflicting emotions that can be whirling around within us that sometimes needs a little bit of help to get out. And that's what cognitive behavior therapy helps. That's what maybe some kind of antidepressant, anti-anxiety, may be of assistance. Again, we'll talk more about that at another class. Well, what are some of the symptoms of PTSD? The experiencing recurring and intrusive thoughts and memories of the trauma. Nightmares or flashbacks of the trauma where you feel that you are living it right now, that you're kind of presentizing the past trauma and reliving it in the moment. We sometimes avoid distressing memories of the trauma. We can avoid locations, we can avoid people, we can avoid anything that we equate or think of when we remember the trauma. Again, all kinds of crazy feelings within us, very, very unreasonable feelings. We're our worst enemies, guilt, shame, anger, afraid, fear. Just think about the COVID PTSD. I liken it to when HIV and AIDS first came to our attention. Can you imagine the trauma that someone felt watching a loved one die? Excuse me, the bell is ringing, so I must be telling the truth. I apologize. I thought I put it on vibrate. It's from the United States of America, meaning it's the Social Security Service and someone that's going to get your money because you just pressed a button. So you can excuse me. So all kind now, as I was saying, that can you imagine the horror? You have a loved one, and the loved one is suffering terribly, terribly from AIDS, dying in a painful way. This was what happened at the beginning, very painful way. The world was against you. People were ostracizing you. You were experiencing this at the same time knowing that that's going to be your fate. Could you imagine what kind of trauma and PTSD comes from something like that? And again, some of us, there are a lot of people that believe that we have, I'm trying to get a lot of topics in because I don't have much time. There's a lot of people that believe that there's a trauma load. And sometimes we get like an overload and we really can't handle it. So there are people that seem to just have bad experience after bad experience after bad experience, and they really don't evolve the way somebody might in terms of remedying it or getting over it, because their baseline is just so low. They've had it. There can be trouble sleeping. And this symptom, hypervigilance, where the phone rings and you jump, where someone calls your name and you jump, or you think you heard something on television and you jump. Not a great way to live. And as I said, there's help for it, especially with cognitive behavior therapy and drugs. Let me see, what else do I want to tell you before I hand it back to Uncle Sal? You know, when the stress that you're experiencing disrupts your daily functioning, that's when you really need to seek help. Because again, to reiterate, help is out there. A lot of people feel, why don't you just get over it? Well, a lot of people do get over it. As I said, the majority, the vast majority get over it. But there are those of us who don't get over it. So seek help. It is out there. Yes, you can have PTSD from a traumatic experience that most people would certainly label as such, but you can also have PTSD from a stressor that many people would say, get over it. What's the matter with you? Everybody can experience that. Let's see. Recovery for people that can kind of get over it takes about 3 months. And that's why oftentimes you hear people say that if you've had a traumatic experience, certainly a death of a loved one, not to do anything for the first year. We hear that a lot, but sometimes you have to know that when you've had a traumatic experience, it doesn't have to be the death of a loved one. It's an experience that you label for you something that has caused you deep emotional hurt and unbalance. And when people turn to you and say, just get over it, they need to get over telling you just to get over it. Because some people can, and some people find it necessary to seek help. And that's really the basic message that I wanted to put out. And that PTSD and COVID is so unique because so many of us, you don't have to be a mental health worker to have PTSD from COVID. Many of us, and I'm sure you can relate, are still kind of afraid to go to indoor events, or we're starting to travel a little more, but should I wear a mask on the plane? Shouldn't I wear a mask on the plane? Even that relief of the you need to wear a mask on the plane mandate is causing a lot of confusion and upsettedness and fear. And then fear can convert to anger, and anger can convert to making decisions that are not the most appropriate, or maybe yelling at somebody that has come to a meeting simply to tell you and explain protocols to you. And all of a sudden, that anger converts to racial slurs. That's what it's all about, because Sal is beating the drums, excuse me, on fear equals anger equals some kind of behavioral action that can be very, very negative. Because it's so easy to be angry, but it is very difficult to articulate our fears, or even for us to acknowledge our fears to ourselves. But anger, very, very easy. And now that I've spoken about anger and fear, I think it's a brilliant, seamless segue back to Sal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Terry. I do think it is. It's important to note that we are living through one of those historical events of a pandemic, and there will be a residual effect from that, such as you say. If you're in an elevator and someone sneezes, it will be not just I'm going to catch a cold, but am I going to catch COVID? Am I going to be in a hospital for the next 6 months and maybe die a horrific death? And there are many experiences for those who did get the worst effects of COVID. This was one very horrible disease, and certainly for the healthcare workers who were dealing with it. Mind you, this is, we think of healthcare workers as, they deal with this all the time. They're acclimated to it. They're not unaffected by it. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are having real problems today, and it's one of the reasons that you see people leaving the career. This also provides, however, fertile ground for the propagandist. When those feelings, emotions, things that hit your psyche are agitated, it becomes a tool for the propagandist. It's fertile ground for the propagandist. And we will see things around. We've already seen tactics used to exploit it. We will see more of it. As you know, this is a topic that's near and dear to me. I am a post-traumatic stress disorder person from my service in Vietnam. And there is treatment, and it's very effective treatment. So people can be helped. However, one of the problems we have is because these tools can be used for political purposes, there's an active force that kind of works against the treatment. And so it's important for people who are going through that experience and going through treatment that they recognize that noise in the background and not be influenced by it. I want to kind of just recap some things as to where we are, because what we're trying to do in this class is to highlight how things about the individual's psychology are the targets of a propagandist to make someone believe something that is not founded on fact, that is designed to agitate, manipulate, and to have people subscribe to something, even if it is not in their interest, even if it is directly against their interest. And it has reached a level of sophistication that that today, where it doesn't matter what day it is, there will be loads of messages sent out to that are purely propaganda and are aimed at antagonizing people. And we are on the brink of our government collapsing as a result of it. So when we talk about the psychological aspect, it can seem like being nerdy and getting way too technical. Understand, for the propagandists, they are deep into that. That is the heart of their art. I have sent you out pieces to highlight how it's done, and I would like for you to be recognizing when you're looking at a political campaign, advertising, or any of it, to see the tools that are being used for the manipulation. Now, what happens is when an individual experiences a very unpleasant event, some horrible thing occurs. An example would be a police officer arrives at your door to tell you that your child has been killed in an auto wreck. What happens is the psyche now is under extreme distress. It's horror. The brain may not be able to accept it. And so we have built-in defense mechanisms that are there to try to protect our psyche, try to protect ourselves from a cognition which is too horrible to confront. And so defense mechanisms are things that respond to distress in what is an effort to reduce that anxiety. An example is denial. Another one is intellectualization. Let me get this working. And so the anxiety-inducing unpleasant event becomes the initial stimulus, ultimately leading to a cascade of dominoes that become the root system for fear and hate and anger. And so we have the response known as defense mechanisms. We have the example of denial. So the police officer comes and says, your child has been killed in an auto accident. One of the defense mechanisms is denial. What that means is I say, this can't be true. This must be a mistake. It can't be my kid. I spoke to my kid this morning at 10 o'clock. Everything was fine. You're wrong. This is the function of denial. And it's not something that you do through the frontal lobe. It is an autonomic reaction from the psyche trying to protect. Another one, intellectualization. I just told you that your child was killed in an auto wreck. My response is, well, statistically, this was bound to happen. We don't have strong enough laws. We need better laws. So I'm responding to this horrible message by intellectualizing, by making, and all, many times when I've been with people who have had to confront something horrible, the response is one that isn't what you might project would happen. Why wasn't he sad? Why didn't he cry when we came in and told him his wife was murdered? Did he murder her? Mind you, this is just that response that is there trying to protect the person. And so what you get is when the defense mechanism goes to an extreme, then we're moving into the area of mental illness. Now, for many people, the defense mechanism protects them for a period of time. Then they come to recognize what happened and they can have emotional breakdowns and all of that. But the point is that for those where it goes to an extreme, we can be moving into what becomes mental illness in one form or another. And so what all of this means is that we have this horrible event, the defense mechanisms kick in. For some, it metastasizes into fear. Okay, so every time I hear a knock at the door, my heart races. I get, adrenaline kicks in. I get frightened because I've already experienced a knock on the door and it was a cop bringing me bad news. And so what happens is this becomes a bias. It impacts my worldview. It impacts the narrative about how the world works. It is, you can try to build a good family and do everything right, but something's going to come along and ruin it, like an auto accident. This becomes my worldview. And this is what a propagandist wants to tap into. They want to identify it. They want to recognize it, and they want to exploit it. So the propaganda seeks to manipulate the target audience. And this task is often spun as, oh, it's just persuasion and not manipulation. Persuasion is an act of causing people to do or believe something which was usually bringing about positive outcomes. On the other hand, manipulation is to bring about things based not on the truth. Okay, so there is a difference, and what the propagandist is looking to do is, can I tap into that? If you have a fear that Black people are going to come and attack your home and rape the women, that becomes the narrative that's in your head. The propagandist wants to identify out of this population how many people have those thoughts and how can I manipulate it so that I can get them to do what I want them to do. If you recall the Willie Horton ad, it brings up the Black guy and the rapist. What does that have to do with the program that Michael Dukakis put together? It doesn't tell you that Michael Dukakis was copying a program that was initiated by Ronald Reagan to great success in California. They leave all that out. So you carve out the context that doesn't serve your purpose. You only put the information there that prompts that population to do what you want them to do. Another example is, let's say the objective is, I don't want to provide healthcare for poor people. And so I identify biases, the worldview, the narrative of the target audience. And let's say that we identify that the target audience believes that government caters to people of color at the expense of white people. And so what I'm going to do, I want to take what is my objective and I want to craft a message within the context of that bias. I want to reframe what I'm going to say so that I do it in a way that achieves my manipulative objective. So what I know is that the word government triggers thoughts about government action catering to people of color. The notion that government, I'm going to put forth a message that says that the government should not get between you and your doctor. And so I'm reframing it. It's not that I don't want government to give healthcare to poor people. I don't want the government to get between you and your doctor. And so that's why I'm against healthcare. I reframe it. Now I get you on my side because you don't want the government getting between you and your doctor. And what happens is we wind up opposing a healthcare system that is helping poor people get health coverage. For those of you who have seen my graphics before, this can be a traumatic experience. but it's the best I can do. I'm not an artist, really don't have much skill in just about anything, but starts with the anxiety event, triggers a defense. This starts the development of the root of fear, biases, the narrative, the worldview. The propagandist identifies that fear, that bias, crafts a message, reframes the issue. I can provide cover. You don't have to be against Black people to be against the healthcare, to be against Obamacare. You have to be against the government getting between you and your doctor. See, it's not that, it's innocuous. And so you then solidify your support that then drives the overall campaign. Next week, Terry is going to talk a lot about defense mechanisms, and it is to understand where these things have their genesis. Where are they born? When we get to the point where someone is a stone cold racist, or whatever that particular bias might be, it will have roots in something that occurred that prompted defense mechanisms to trigger and then start the process moving into fear and hate and all that goes with it. Okay, so with that, Lauren, we can open up for questions and comments.
Okay, we're gonna use the raise the hand function. We already have a question here from Dave Marcus. Dave, if you would like to put your video back on, then we can do lip reading for those of us that can't hear as well.
So how did this compare to the pandemic of 1918?
Yeah, there certainly was not the level of communication that there was, that we have today. It took a while for the healthcare system to recognize that it had this pandemic going. They didn't have a vaccine against it. People did, eventually people did respond with masks, but there wasn't a daily deluge of information about it, and it was not used from a propaganda standpoint to gin up the population against hatred for selected people. People did eventually get to fatigue, and they then said, "I've had enough. We're just not going to wear masks anymore." And that's what happened. And so, and that was one of the diseases that, you let it run its course. And you could do that with COVID. You could just let COVID run its course. And mind you, the London Medical School that made projections said, barring any interventions in America, you'll have 1 to 2 million people dead. And in the next week or so, we'll reach the 1 million mark. And so it may be the interventions that came about, vaccines, people wearing masks, shutdowns, and all of that, that's going to keep us from eclipsing the 2 million mark. So, eventually that flu ran its course, and, that's what happened.
I've noticed in historical readings that none of this is new.
No, the plague. I mean, the Black Plague.
Not the plague, but the manipulation of people for, political or ruling advantage, if you will.
Sure. Look, when we talked about how racialization comes about in the 9th century on the African continent, what are the people who are benefiting from, and mind you, this is really the time when slavery takes a very dramatic mutation, meaning you can pick people up from their roots and move them thousands of miles away to serve your needs. We have now elevated slavery to an industrial level for mass production, moving salt from Iraq across Africa. And the people who were benefiting the most, those who were getting the richest, what did they say? Well, it's because they're the lighter colored skin, or they're the darker colored skin. It was manipulation to say that they are them, my people, the people around me who are there to prop me up as the emperor. We're the us. And so it was all based on what is a lie, right?
Yeah. Margita?
Yes, hi. What I have noticed is that even news outlets that I've always had a lot of confidence in, such as NewsHour, etc., to me, what I hear is they have these trigger words too, and it really gets on my nerves. So lately with this federal judge and that unfortunate drop of the mask mandates on public transportation and planes, etc., what I hear on that particular network is they seem to shift the blame for that. They call it mass confusion. Like this is like something that really gets to my nerve, mass confusion. It's not a mass confusion. It is manipulation of people and decision-making by people who don't have any business making decisions. So it seems to me that in interviewing reps for the government and the healthcare and CDC, they're trying to put it on them that they cause the mass confusion instead of looking at where it really comes from. So, and that's just one word. It seems like how shall we put it, the dog whistles or those words that trigger responses are now coming into areas that I thought were safe from them. And I don't know why. Is it like they're trying to bend over to be what they consider, fair? But to me, it's not fair if you use a propagandist notion and then accuse people who really are not the cause for that. So it's like this during the pandemic too, what I witnessed is this primitive scapegoating. As was said very clearly, the virus is the enemy, but people are looking for all these not very well informed scapegoat terms, it's the government and blah, blah, blah. And that is as primitive as what happened during the plague or, in earlier times is you look for easy scapegoat causes instead of looking at what science presents to us as the latest data. And what I find is that there's no mass confusion. The government and the CDC and the healthcare, they have given us the latest data, and they always said we will have to change it according to how the virus mutates, etc. So, I mean, what is so hard about that? That's not mass confusion. That is your brain having to accept the latest development and mutation. So anyway, I'm as you can see, that really bugs me.
Yeah, no, but one of the things I want to just emphasize is that if you remember when we talked about biases, that all I need to do is say a word or a phrase, and that word or that phrase triggers in your brain a whole narrative. So there's like an hour's worth of information that gets triggered, but all I had to do was say the one word or the one phrase. Okay. Now, part of the role, the propagandist is public relations. People in public relations invest a lot of time to get to news reporters and news outlets to be able to infuse those words into their repertoire, into what it is that how they refer to things. It's not by accident, it's by design. And so, and also remember, the news report is very limited in the context that it gives. It deals with that story in 2 minutes. Well, you really want more context so that it's not confusing. It is, you need to explain out that we're dealing with a virus, it changes, the healthcare world has to monitor it, see where it is today, see where it is tomorrow, make adjustments accordingly. There's nothing confusing about that, but that is if you're going to take the whole time to say that. And so it's important. Those words, when you're watching, be it a news report, a commercial, whatever it is, those individual words that have more meaning than just that one phrase or that one word that you know is triggered in the head. That's the skill.
Okay. Do we have, I don't see anything in chat.
I think Ed had his hand up. Ed, are you still with us?
With Aqua.
Yeah,
Um,
he may have had to walk away from.
yeah, he doesn't have his video on right now, so it's hard to tell. Anybody else have anything?
Does the distrust go back to Ronald Reagan, or did it go back further than that in government?
Oh, way further.
Yeah, you know, that's a great question, Dave, and I think it's I think we go through different phases, and look, there I would bring it back to the distress from fears of Indian attacks and slave rebellions. And that has been what has stuck with us throughout our history and continues to be fertile ground for manipulation.
Looks like Graham and Jennifer are with us.
The propagandists and the PR has gotten ever more sophisticated because, I mean, you talk about a 2-minute story. Those 2-minute stories have been shortened down to 30-second snippets on these, you know, social media or whatever. And they don't care about the background story anymore. It's just the word, it caused you anxiety or to respond, and that's it.
They're looking at cards, you have to have a pass.
No, and look, to make note of this,
I did that.
if I put on PBS or CNN or MSNBC, and many people turn to broadcast to get their news. Who are they? Are they interviewing the source, the target? No, they're interviewing people from the Washington Post, people from the Wall Street Journal. They're interviewing other reporters. Why are they interviewing other reporters? Because they don't have their own. They, you know, they've created their monopolies, and then they got rid of their newsrooms to a bare minimum. You know, look, the example, the one that makes my head explode. Afghanistan, we've been at war there for 20 years. No, I shouldn't have to tell you that. We've been at war there since 1979. Why isn't there a reporter on ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC? I mean, I respect those organizations, but the fact of the matter is there isn't anybody with historical context, with a historical background, who can actually look at the daily event and see what's going on with Kim Il-yoon in Korea isn't something that just happened yesterday. Goes back many years, and we need that so we can understand what in the hell is going on. So yeah, I mean, you're right. The story is shorter. The journalists are fewer. It's ripe ground. But mind you, the public relations agencies continue to expand, and you're adding to it the artificial intelligence data mining. So if I'm a propagandist and I'm going to craft these messages, these very sophisticated messages, I'm going to have a techie, somebody who's deep into digital data analysis, who is mining your brain to tell me what you think. So you're mixing those two very sophisticated elements, and it's going up against the journalism world that has been depopulated. This is very trying times.
Ed, would you like to try again? Or, because I saw you came back with us for a bit there and then went away again. And this would be your time to jump in and ask that question or make your comment.
You may have had to walk away.
Yeah.
Ralph, I see Ralph out there.
Let's see.
Oh, there's Ed. Ed is back. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, too.
If you can unmute. No.
And Kay has a question also.
Go ahead, Kay.
Oh, I was just going to say my daughter is a Twitter person, and she gets all of her news from Twitter, and that's and from TikTok, and that's like 2 sentences. We're not even talking about 30 seconds. And she'll send me stuff all the time. And, you know, absolutely no context around that.
Right.
And there's so many people that are on that. And probably a lot of us aren't. But to get your news that way, and she doesn't watch even broadcast news like you're talking about. And now we've got Elon Musk, you know, at least the COVID stuff was being blocked, the false stuff was blocked by Twitter, which was kind of nice. So that didn't go crazy. But now Elon Musk, who I think is a Trump fan and everything, I mean, he is into total freedom of speech unconditionally, and he's going to open that thing up, and that could cause crazy problems.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Right. Yeah. Ralph, go ahead if you can unmute.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I was just going to say that my favorite propaganda right now is the nonstop garbage coming across the television airwaves. All you have to do is turn on the TV and you're inundated with it. The political commercials are amazing. I don't even like David Perdue, but the commercials about him in China are unbelievable at the context that is left out. But like there are no other Republicans making money with China right now.
Yeah, right.
It's just insane. But my favorite right now is don't break our prime. Don't break our prime. I mean, it's an antitrust bill, for God's sakes. And big tech is screaming bloody murder. And I would recommend to everybody, just as a textbook example, I just put it on my Facebook page. If you Google for who is behind the "Don't Break Our Prime" commercial, actually just doing the search showed me that many people are asking who is behind. Under that stem on the Google search, there were dozens of things. Who is behind this? Who is behind this? Who is behind this? And because I'm interested, I'm going to go back and read more of them. But the people behind the big tech commercials is big tech. They're behind "Don't Break Our Prime." And it's a ridiculous argument. They don't want competition. They do not want medium and small businesses to get in on the profits. God help them if that happens, you know, because then they can't make as much money. So heaven forfend that we should actually have actual competition in the United States. We're not going to have any of that. We got to shut that down. So they are trying to create this fake groundswell. Yeah, don't break our prime. The article that you'll come up with 2 articles on Google They're both good. And one of them mentions that more people have things delivered by Google Prime than actually voted in the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Talk about head explode. I mean, that's insane. That's crazy, you know? So no wonder they aimed at that target, right? Let's get 150 million people mad, and they'll tell Congress to leave it alone. They'll never look at, you know, what it actually is. They'll never look at monopolies or whether that's a good thing. They'll never look. And the mom and pops will never get in on business. I just would recommend that to folks as a great example of this fake movement building that you can do with things like social media and television.
Yeah, no, and you know, the idea of hiding the source of the information, you know, all those propaganda messages that I've emailed out, you can't find who's the source of that information.
Right. Well, the only thing that saves us here is that the authors of both of the two articles that come up first, one of them's like a consumer reporter, kind of like Clark Howard. And he actually figured out who the CCIA is. And it's a front group. You just create an industry group and then you kind of put it in the background somewhere, and nobody ever asked, well, who the hell is CCIA? Well, it's the folks represented on it are all the big tech industries, all of them, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, all of them.
Yeah, and the CCIA will have, one of the C's will be citizens.
Oh yeah,
usually.
Yeah.
They title themselves like.
The title is usually not.
Right.
We have a last minute comment.
Yes, if I get some mute. Okay, Sal?
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
Yes. I'm in the midst of working with the curriculum committee on the biographies for the fall. And I will just give you one phrase which will tell you what I'm doing. And the biography is going to be by Rudyard Kipling. And so the simple words for you to think about when you look at the other aspects of the American history and the global history is the white man's burden. And Kipling has gone around the world in 70 years, including the United States. And when we get to that point, you'll have lots of support on all of the things you've been talking about ever since Genghis Khan started and, you know, Alexander the Great and things like that. And so they've given me 1 hour, not only for the biography, but for the poetry that we studied, both by Whitman and now you'll know more about Kipling, but this will not be the first time that I've given Kipling a chance to speak to the to Suga, because we had a young woman who gave a course called Evil Women. And the first one was Rebecca of not Sunnybrook Farm, but of Daphne du Maurier's book. And she was one evil person. And there is a poem which became a moneymaker for Frank Sinatra. And it's The Way to Mandalay. So you're going to get lots of stuff to support all the things you've been talking about. And I wish I had had a video again, because Terry, I put on my Red Sox baseball game because the Red Sox and the Celtics are chewing up the rest of the two leagues. Celtics are now 4-0 over the Brooklyn Nets. So I'm trying to be responsive to all of the courses that we've been taking and show the strong linkages. And Sinatra said, I'll do it my way. So they changed him, and he went to the Road to Mandalay, and you have White Man's Burden, and you have all of the things that happened when Kipling came to the United States and went from Calcutta to San Francisco to Mark Twain, and went all over the place and actually lived in the United States, up in Vermont and things like that. So I would hope, Lauren, that you could figure out, give me back my video, and then we can say goodbye.
Okay.
Maybe a course should be the psychology of the Met fan.
Yeah.
Yes. 69 was good. 86 was good. The
Nine.
rest of it just sucked.
Yeah. Where are the Brooklyn Dodgers now?
Yeah.
LA.
No,
Well,
they
it's-
ceased to exist when they moved to California.
Here we go.
Oh,
There
he
we
is.
are.
Here we
Yeah.
are. Well,
Okay.
Mookie, Mookie left the Boston Red Sox after 40 years, and he's still doing the job on the Braves and things like that. So, it's all a matter of what you like to do to spend your extra time if you have it between your grandchildren and everybody else.
Yeah.
So,
Great. Great. No,
And
that'd
the
be
Nets
terrific.
deserve everything that they did for trading Julius Erving.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Dave and Joy, I noticed
Yeah,
you two stay
I'm
in
sorry,
separate
it's a
rooms.
non-sports question, but has anybody seen any of the texts that DeSantis said were unacceptable for math?
Yeah, it's terrible.
I mean, I cannot imagine what it could say
Yeah,
in a math text.
yeah, I thought the same thing. Has anybody seen it? Like,
No, not that I know of.
what can you do in math class that's offensive?
Story
Yeah.
problems, story problems.
Come on, how
Yeah,
many
no,
math texts using
but
use?
again, it's, you can see the technique at work.
Absolutely.
This is, he's speaking right to those who are, ready to be ginned up against race. And that's
And who don't
it.
know math.
Very clear, very clear. Yeah.
Have you followed Lost Mountain with Ginny Earhart
No.
in Cobb County? Okay, they want
Yes,
to make a city
That's
of
my
Lost.
backyard.
They want to make a city of Lost Mountain, and the defense is because otherwise, if the Democrats are in control, it's going to be too much rezoning, and we're going to change the density of everything. But the truth of the matter is, her husband Earl Earhart, who used to be in the legislature for everybody, works for Pulte Homes now, and they want to rezone, and their rezoning got turned down, and that's why they're doing it. So they're blaming it on, well, this is going to bring all this dense housing, but that's what they're trying to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, that again, reframe it, and you got it right. Well, okay. Next week, you have Terry doing defense mechanisms, and thank you all very much.
Good luck, Sal.
Good luck, Sal.
Good luck, Sal.
We'll see you.
Recover quickly and
Thanks.
uneventfully. And you'll let me know so that I can tell everybody in the class, give them an update.
I will.
And Bess, hey, you have to send out an email because some of us won't be able to be in class next week.
You know why? Because Sal isn't going to be there. This is going to be such an assault to my ego. But I'm ready for it. I'm ready. I can handle it. I'm getting up in the middle of the night in Hawaii. Like, I don't want to lay guilt on anybody, but I'm getting up in the middle of the night in Hawaii to do the class. But that's all I have to say.
Right.
If everyone wants to unmute and give Terry and Sal a round of applause.
Okay, everybody.
Thanks, Sal.
Nice,
Sal.
Thanks, Sal. Thanks, Terry.
And we'll
Thanks, Terry.
Sal and
Good
Terry
luck, Sal.
taking on this big adventure. And we'll see